One of the really key exercises in training your body to have core stability is the leg float. It took me 20 years to really learn how to do that. It won't take you that long. I have really figured out, I think, how to teach this, and I've had success teaching it to people in the steps that I'll present here. I want to set you up for success. So these are some of the techniques I use in my studio with my clients. I use what's called a posture pillow. You aren't going to have one of these around, but you can take towels. What I want to make is a little ramp here. The front of the ramp be maybe an inch high, and then it'll go up to maybe 3 or 4 inches high. What I want to do is I want to place this ramp between my shoulder blades, about halfway between halfway down from the top of my shoulder blade to the bottom of my shoulder blade. So I want to come in, put my feet on the floor, bend my knees, put my hands behind me, and then I'm going to lower down, come onto my elbows, and I'm going to find that area that I want to lay my shoulder blades on, and then I'm actually going to squiggle down a little bit further so I really can feel my ribs on the ground. I feel the support of my ribs. I feel the weight of my rib cage. This is going to support my spine, the back of my neck, and the back of my head. And I want to have my neck nice and long in the back. And I want to think of a little bit of a slight tuck of the chin, not so much that when the chin comes down towards the chest, watch what happens. So when the chin comes down to my chest, you can see I lift up through my ribs. So that's too much. I want just enough that I feel tensional support through the deep neck flexors, which is the top part of the core. Very important. So I'm going to position my upper body in that manner. My collarbones are wide, my shoulders are wide, my ribs are heavy. So I feel the support of the ribs on the ground. I want to engage my transversus by drawing the two fronts of my pelvis together. I want to keep my pelvis heavy. I want to keep the backs of my ribs heavy, and I want to keep the back of my neck long and the front of my chin just ever so slightly drawing towards the front of my throat and pressing the back of my head into the pillow. So I'm going to have my hands on my pelvis. I'm going to find that nice centered pelvis. The next thing I'm going to check for is how much tension is in my hip joint. So a lot of people are very tight in their hip flexors. It's from sitting so much, it's from our lifestyle. So if you're starting like this, if you have your feet quite close to you, chances are it's going to be pretty tight in your hip flexors. So these are the muscles that flex your hip joint. A great way to let go of some of that is to just walk your feet slightly further away from you. And I can already feel that released the hip flexor. So this is a more optimal position for me to start in than with my hip flexors tensed. So I'll keep my hip flexors nice and soft because I want them to be unengaged, then engaged, and then disengaged. That's what we're trying to train here. I'm going to just remind myself of the role of my transverse abdominis, that muscle that wraps around the torso and pulls into the center. And as it does that it's actually tractioning the spine and keeping the spine stable. It's such a cool system. So I'm going to engage that. I'm going to breathe in into my belly and then exhale as I draw my fingers in through the midline. And I might do 4 or 5 of those breaths just to remind that brain-body communication with my core stabilization system. And then I like to bring my arms out to the side for leg float. It just makes me feel wide across my collarbones. And I'm going to inhale to lengthen through my spine. And that lengthening through the spine is stabilizing for the spine. I'm going to anchor through my left big toe to stabilize the left side of my body. And I'm going to float my right leg up into leg float. And then slowly lower down. Inhale, prepare. Anchor the left big toe, left heel, and float this leg up really slowly. And then come back down. So I inhale, lengthen through my spine, anchor through my foot and the rest of my body, and I float this leg up, pouring the weight of my thigh bone into my hip joint. I should feel like I'm pouring sand through this bone down into the back of the pelvis. And then once I have that weight in the back of the pelvis, then when I lower the leg, it feels like a feather. You want that leg to feel heavy coming up and coming into the back of the hip joint. And you want it light as a feather as it floats down to the ground. Take a break, lengthen out your legs before we do the other side. You might notice, as I notice, the right side of my back is a lot flatter on the ground from doing that exercise. And some of that is because with the leg float, what we're really engaging is a muscle called the psoas, which is a very important muscle for core stability that attaches to the spine all the way from the bottom of the ribs right to the hip joint. And when we do leg float, it is actually tensioning that muscle. And what we want to do is tension that muscle in a way that it doesn't move the spine. And that's what the leg float does so beautifully, is it trains that muscle to be quiet and steady and to keep the pelvis quiet and the spine quiet as you move the leg. It's a fabulous exercise. So let's do the other side. I'm going to bend my knees and stand my feet. And I'd like to I'm going to go back and just talk about this. When I ask people to do this, I see a lot of different things in the studio. I'll see people, okay, bend your knees, stand up. They'll do this, which is really hard on your back, and that is not stable for your spine or your pelvis. So a really nice way of getting this so that it's good for your body is to think, inhale, elongate through my spine, and then you're going to roll your leg to the side of the foot, bend the knee, and slide the heel along the ground, and then stand the foot. Same thing on the other side. Roll my leg out, drag my heel in, stand my foot. Check and see if my hip creases are soft. If they're not, I'm going to work my feet away from me a little bit, or step my feet away from me a little bit. I'm going to check that my pelvis is centered in between the pelvic bones and the pubic bone. And then I'm going to anchor through my right big toe and right side of my pelvis. I'm going to reach out through my arms because that's what I like to do to be stable. I'm going to lengthen through my spine, engage my deep neck flexors, and I'm going to breathe in, and on the exhale, I'm going to float my left leg up to tabletop. So lifting, pouring the weight of the femur bone in the hip joint, and then floating that feather back to the ground. You might do, 8 or 10 of those. And then let's do the butterfly motion of the leg. So you're testing the stability of the spine, the pelvis in different directions of movement. I'm going to anchor through my right big toe, my right heel, and then allow my left leg to open like a butterfly and back to center. As I breathe, as much as is necessary and as little as possible. The more I can commit to the weight of my bones on the ground, the easier it is to stabilize. Excess tension makes it very difficult to stabilize the body. And then lengthen the legs back out. And enjoy those nice long legs, those heavy hip joints, the wide pelvis, and the long spine.